Therefore, that everyone is like pray you while you may be found. Sure. And the mighty water dry. You will not reach him. You are my hiding place. You will protect me in trouble. And surround me with songs of deliverance. When they, I will instruct you and teach you the way you should go. I will counsel you what you will do. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, grant to our days wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, guiding the affairs of this corner of the Holy Spirit. May the distance
Our Father, God in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever.
Morning, honorable members. When the business of the House suspended, the member for St. Anne's had reserved the floor on behalf of the member for Mount Moriah. But just before we proceed, I've received a notice from the member for Long Island with respect to his communication, and the chair has acceded to his request to bring an explanation to this honorable House with regard to some of the documents that were tabled yesterday. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Long Island.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't see the member for Cat Island in the House at the moment. Yesterday, the leader of the opposition, the member for Cat Island, notified me of the use of his mother's obituary as an exhibit in the EY report, Water and Sewage. As you know, that report was tabled yesterday. Personally, I would not have put such an exhibit in that report. Notwithstanding that, Mr. Speaker, I note that the auditors used the obituary as they felt it was evidence of what was set out in the report. Notwithstanding the fact that we may be on opposite sides, the member for Cat Island communicated his hurt for me in very colorful fashion as well, but he communicated his hurt to me. I was uneasy, and given that, I reached out and discussed this matter with my minister. Mr. Speaker, I grew up with old people in Long Island who taught me the strength of character and conscience. Frankly, in my short political career, it is never my intention to cause harm or hurt to a colleague. And notwithstanding our political differences.
Honorable member, just a moment.
Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering if I should start over.
He was in the precincts.
Okay.
You can continue, honorable member.
Notwithstanding our political differences, Mr. Speaker, the member for Cat Island is my colleague at Cat Island. And so I've consulted my minister. Like I said, I felt a little uneasy and taken his advice, and I wish to assure all my colleagues that my sole interest in this place is to represent the people of Long Island and to ensure that I put matters before this House that are relevant to our deliberations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador.
Mr. Speaker, the intervention by the member for Long Island highlights the concern of which I spoke yesterday. and the egregious and faulty deficiency of the report. Because this is what they have done. This is what they did. Disinterred the bones of my mother to make a point. That's what they did. And it is said that was done to connect Merlin Poitier to me. But they didn't need to do that. They didn't have to go to disinter the bones of my mother to confirm that. All it required was a talk with me. That's what makes the whole report, and which supports the supposition and proposition that's all about a witch hunt to smear and to discredit without the input of others.
Honorable member, could you restrict your comments to the exhibit?
This was not necessary if the proper procedure, right? The proper procedure was engaged in. And if, as I said to my letter to Ernst & Young, all it required was for them to say to me, what is the relationship of Merlin Poitier to me? Well, I'm advised that the lawyers for the company, who is well known to all of those on that side, well known to all of those on that side, the lawyer for the company in question, well known, the lawyer is well known, right, and better known to the Minister of Works, will perhaps have something to say about it. Yeah.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Mount Moriah.
Good morning. Mr. Speaker, I stand and I am privileged once again to rise in this honorable house to represent the good and resilient people of the great constituency of Mount Moriah who have entrusted me with a most sacred role of ensuring that their views and opinions are properly represented. I am humbled to be their voice in this honorable house. And before I get into the meat of my presentation, Mr. Speaker, I would like to, on behalf of my wife and I, extend heartfelt condolences to the family of a great lady, Lady Laurie Miller, on her passing. Lady Miller holds a special place in my heart. During the time I served as the officer in charge of the Grand Bahama District, Sir Albert and Lady Laurie treated me like a son, a member of the family. Every Sunday she would have a special seat reserved for me at the dinner table, just next to her. I will always remember those memories. May her soul rest in peace. As I continue, Mr. Speaker, and while I'm on my feet, I would like to extend special birthday greetings to some very special persons in my life. The first being my son, Joshua, whose birthday is today and is celebrating it. Happy birthday, Joshua, wherever you may be. And the second, to my aunt Cess Francis, from the great community of Stapleton Gardens, a very strong supporter and a fabulous person. I look forward to catching up with you a little later, Cess. And if you're listening, I pray God's blessings on you, and may you live to see many more years. As well as to those persons who are celebrating birthdays in the great constituency of Mount Moriah, happy birthday to you all if you're celebrating your birthday today. And I will be remiss if I fail to say Happy Women's Day to all of the beautiful women in the great constituency of Mount Moriah and across this great nation of ours. You are the winds beneath our wings. We will be nowhere without you. Mr. Speaker, at the end of my presentation, I intend to offer up the Commissioner's Annual Policing Plan for 2018, which is enshrined in legislation. And for far too long now, Mr. Speaker, this is something that the previous government have been neglecting to do. But if we're going to hold our law enforcement officers accountable, then it's very imperative and important that they themselves adhere to the law, and the law requires that the Commissioner of the Police, at the beginning of each year, produce a policing plan and make that plan public. And 6 months into that year, we will have an opportunity to determine whether the Commissioner and his officers are living up to that plan and whether that plan is having a positive effect on crime in our country. This is what accountability is all about. This is what responsibility is all about. And so you will continue to see, at the beginning of each year, a plan produced by the Commissioner and his executive team for the entire Bahamas to see. And here is where we begin. Mr. Speaker, since assuming office in May 2017, a new era of accountability and fiscal responsibility and governance has emerged. Given the state of the country's fiscal affairs, coupled with the harsh realities of economic downturns and low recovery of financial prudence, the Minister of Finance outlined our government's role in this honorable House. We have pledged to be stewards of the public's purse and have been vested with the obligation of ensuring that we fulfill the expectations of those who are responsible for electing us to this honorable House. I am ever so grateful to be a part of this era in Bahamian history, because unlike before, the Bahamian people have a government that it can trust with the management of its fiscal affairs. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister responsible for national security, and under my remit are the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Department of Corrections, and the Parliamentary Registration Department. Upon assuming the mantle of leadership of these respective institutions, I have been clear and purposeful in my resolve to address the issues of crime, border security, civil rights, and offender rehabilitation head-on. I have pledged to be honest in the critical issues which plague and threaten our way of life. More importantly, I have committed myself to focused leadership, which demands that I give as much of myself as I expect others to do. Mr. Speaker, it is our government's goal to usher in strong business acumen while being ever so cognizant of our role to defend, protect, and guard the national and territorial sovereignty and integrity of the Bahamas and its citizens. Excellent. The proliferation of convoluted methods of operation within the public service has precipitated the need to reframe the formal structure. Hence, I have systematically begun to restructure the Ministry of National Security. Restructuring and reorganizing the agency was necessary to address all of the programmatic needs, allow the more effective and efficient communication practices, and provide support services which are needed to advance our organizational goals. More importantly, the restructuring of the Ministry of National Security was necessary to achieve greater service and operational advantages with both our internal and external partners. This will enable greater strategic decision-making and foster more collaborative working relationships. Redesigning our ministerial structure and breaking with the past says that the status quo is no longer acceptable if we are to initiate real change. Mr. Speaker, as a former police officer and now member of Parliament, Bahamians can be assured that our government, and I take the safety and security of our people and visitors very seriously. Let me confirm that both the safety and security of the people of this country are treated as a priority. Let me further, therefore, reassure the Bahamian people and this House that I will outline how in this short term, since being elected, we have made tremendous strides in making our country safer and more productive. Mr. Speaker, the national security budget was increased by over 4% during this current fiscal year, and it's totaled just over $232 million. Of the aforementioned total funds were disbursed to the following agencies inclusive of the Ministry of National Security, which was allotted some $13,922,620, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, which was allotted some $136,262,620, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, which was allotted some $55,380,776, the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services, which was allotted some $25,310,467, and the Parliamentary Registration Department, which was allotted some $1,552,633. Mr. Speaker, our government has sought to establish a culture of transparent and accountable practices. As such, the respective department heads for the portfolios under the preview of the Ministry of National Security have been called upon and embrace the adoption of sound fiscal measures that are allowing for the effective execution of anti-crime and law enforcement strategy in the short, medium, and long term, and consistent with our government's policy based on the 4 pillars of prevention, detection, rehabilitation, and reintegration. Collectively, the pillars seek to undergird the preservation of peace, the maintenance of law and order, while safeguarding the integrity of our democratic and Christian way of life. All of the aforesaid are the fundamental basis for the socio-economic development of the Bahamas. Meanwhile, the Parliamentary Registrar Department will continue to identify ways to ensure that every Bahamian has the right and access to the electoral system which governs this country without interference from any individual person or political influence. Mr. Speaker, in this regard, I demanded that the agencies under the purview of my ministerial portfolio remit a full and transparent accounting audit of how finances were expended to safeguard against corrupt practices, mismanagement, and wasteful spending. Of importance to note is that as a result of prudent management, the midterm budget allocation expenditures for the agencies under the purview of my ministry are all within the established budgetary estimates for the fiscal period 2017 to 2018. The agency's spending to date reflected the following percentages of their budget allocations. The Ministry of National Security to date has spent some $6,144,210, or 49% of its allocated budget. The Royal Bahamas Police Force to date has spent $65,643,147, or 48% of its allocated budget. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force to date has spent some $26,949,098, or 48% of its allocated budget. The Bahamas Department of Correctional Service to date has spent some $12,174,574, or 48% of its allocated budget, while the Parliamentary Registration Department to date has spent some $719,718, or 46% of its allocated budget. Mr. Speaker, in June of last year, during my budget contributions, I indicated that our law enforcement agencies will not operate in silos, but form a formidable, seamless nucleus that enforces the law and defends the interests of the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, while ensuring that public safety of all citizens, residents, and visitors against threats of both foreign and domestic nature, providing agency leadership in preventing and eradicating crime, seeking just and corrective punishment for those guilty of unlawful pursuits, and ensuring the fair and impartial administration of justice in all constitutional matters. At the heart of this nucleus will be a bridge of cooperation and camaraderie as its hallmark. Our agencies now understand and have begun to embrace the opportunities to work together, train together, share information, and understand that collectively they are more productive and effective as opposed to in isolation. Mr. Speaker, I wish first to speak specifically to the law enforcement agencies under my ministerial portfolio. I wish to share the tremendous progress we have made in the execution of some of our strategic priorities to ensure that the national safety of the Bahamas. I will then discuss other important areas under my remit. Thus, I begin with the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Mr. Speaker, protecting the citizens of the Bahamas is a fundamental duty of our government. While the crime problem is not isolated to the Bahamas, as it is impacting countries around the world, rest assured that this government is doing all that it can. We are aware that it will take more than just the police to significantly reduce the crime levels in our country. However, we are cognizant of the fact that the Royal Bahamas Police Force is the agency of government which stands on the front line, and that with improved police strategies and better use of resources, we will continue to make tremendous inroads in the prevention and detection of crime and violence. I am pleased to report that as a result of a number of new policy frameworks and several new operational strategies, overall crime figures for the year are down. Combined, both crimes against the person and the property are down by nearly 14% nationwide. Nearly 50 illegal firearms have already been taken off of the streets for the year, and so have over 1,215 rounds of ammunition. Mr. Speaker, I am hastened to add that the recent results are due to the short-term measures initiated on the part of the Royal Bahamas Police Force and with assistance from members of the public. The decreases and other successes are not occurring by happenstance, but by carefully thought out and deliberate changes in the way the Royal Bahamas Police Force conducts its crime-fighting strategies. Law enforcement partnerships, intelligence, drug interdictions, and gun control has been and will continue to be our focus over the next several years. New strategic efforts, such as the establishment of Guns and Gangs Unit and the Rapid Response Team, have clearly demonstrated just how effective police strategies can be once competent leaders are in place. We will remain focused on the gangs as well as the proliferation of firearms in our country. We will facilitate the execution of multi-agency operations across the law enforcement departments to deal with individuals and organizations responsible for the trafficking of firearms into our country and disrupting the methods of operation where they may exist. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian people can rest assured that they can expect to continue to see a reduction in the high levels of crime in our country, which will lessen the fear among our citizens. We have stopped talking and are putting action to words. The proof is in the statistics. We have heard the cries of the Bahamian people. They demanded better, and they are getting better. This is indeed the people's time. Mr. Speaker, I stated in my budget communication in June of 2017 that the government would undertake a comprehensive manpower audit of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. We needed to determine, as a matter of urgency, what is required in the form of human resources to effectively operate the respective police stations so as to continue to provide effective policing services throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I am pleased to report, Mr. Speaker, that that audit is complete, and the researchers are currently preparing to formally present its findings to Cabinet in short order. Results from this study have put us in a position to say, from an evidence-based perspective, one, whether there were adequate numbers of police officers to provide the necessary services to our customers. Two, if yes, then where were such officers deployed, and were they being utilized to perform the tasks that they have been mandated to do? During the manpower audit, it was important to add other variables which would aid in the Royal Bahamas Police Force better policing services. Further to the same, the manpower audit examined, one, the current policies on vacant promotional practices necessary to effectively and efficiently demonstrate transparency and accountability from recruitment to retirement. Two, what, if any, organizational structural changes were necessary to improve manpower proficiencies of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. And three, what were the systematic associations between a reduction in crime and the number of police officers being effectively deployed in the Bahamas? Mr. Speaker, using research methodologies and analysis, the audit preliminary finding revealed that contextual and structural changes are necessary to move the Royal Bahamas Police Force into the 21st century. Preliminary findings also identified an oversaturations within the senior ranks, a lack of transparent and suitable protocols during the last two promotional exercises, the lack of a strategic recruitment and professional development plan to increase productivity, and a lack of proper collection and use of statistical data to better inform crime-fighting initiatives. Mr. Speaker, based on the recommendations from the manpower audit, our government's ultimate goal is to rebrand the Royal Bahamas Police Force with a strategic focus on developing a lean and purposeful agency that is able to police in a robust society driven by technological advances. More importantly, the agency will develop a comprehensive process for recruitment to retirement that is driven by evidence-based data. Officers engage 21st century law enforcement in the Bahamas will focus on core policing functions, while non-traditional areas will now rely on the expertise of industry professionals. The contextual and structural rebranding of the Royal Bahamas Police Force is directly linked to the future growth and development of the country. Also, infusion of civilians into specialized areas of law enforcement is becoming the norm as opposed to the exception. Therefore, my ministry is committed to ushering the Royal Bahamas Police Force into the 21st century law enforcement so as to ensure the delivery of professional and uninterrupted policing services throughout our nation. Mr. Speaker, within a few short months, the Royal Bahamas Police Force intends to recruit 100 additional officers. Unlike our predecessors, who interfered incessantly in the recruitment process of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, our government has committed itself to be different. The recruitment process will not be driven by politics, sexism, or nepotism. Unlike years past, 21st century candidates will have to meet higher standards of eligibility and will have to successfully complete a battery of tests to be considered. These tests will include physical fitness assessment, medical examination, mental health screening, drug testing, written assessments, and other vetting criteria. To build a Royal Bahamas Police Force that is capable of dealing with the complexities of the 21st century, it is imperative that the agency place value on the educational achievements, physical fitness, and socialization skills when making hiring decisions. Globally, law enforcement agencies are engaging in more strategic and rigorous hiring processes in this 21st century. The emergence and evolution of new crimes in the form of cyber attacks are becoming more widespread and increasingly devastating. As such, the Royal Bahamas Police Force has to be on the cusp of preparedness. Together, recruitment and hiring will play a major role in shaping how the Royal Bahamas Police Force develops, grows, and ultimately succeeds. The infusion of civilians and other industry personnel will mean that the Royal Bahamas Police Force have to develop new career paths. Civilian employees will play a vital role in supporting uniformed members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force in reducing crime and keeping the Bahamas safe. All of this will mean that only the best and brightest, the most deserving Bahamians, are recruited and afforded the opportunity to serve in this prestigious agency. Mr. Speaker, in the dynamic and constantly changing field of law enforcement, training and education are essential. The Royal Bahamas Police Force is developing a modern 21st century training program for all of its members, which will have as its focus the latest crime fighting and investigative techniques, multi-agency approaches, customer service, management, and leadership. More importantly, succession planning will be key because it will ensure the continuity of the agency's purpose in protecting our great nation. Mr. Speaker, leading law enforcement researchers have contended that a bridge between academia and law enforcement must be forged. In accordance, in the near future, a new memorandum of understanding between the University of the Bahamas and the Police Training College will exist. The expected partnership which has already begun, will aid in the training efforts of officers, as they have hosted several seminars at the Harry Seymour Library, where officers can gain access to various criminal justice electronic databases to assist in their professional development. Mr. Speaker, as promised, we are working towards stimulating our youth by reintroducing the Royal Bahamas Police Force Cadet Corps program.
Excellent.
The program has been dormant since 2009, and it was ultimately responsible for producing some well-rounded and disciplined men and women who currently serve on the police force. The program will cater to high school students interested in becoming police officers. The program is also designed to enlist persons with professional training and knowledge who may want to pursue non-traditional areas of law enforcement. Once up and operational, the Cadet Corps program will be directly headed by a manager who reports to the college, the police college commandant. Cadets will be expected to enroll and serve for at least 2 years. The program will be aligned with the academic calendar year. Therefore, it will not interrupt students' regular academic pursuits. Students enrolled in the program will work for 18 hours per week, 3 of which will be spent for BGCSE preparation. Mr. Speaker, like education and health, providing essential services to the Bahamian populace is challenging due to the archipelagic nature of our nation. Nonetheless, my government is one of the people, about the people, and for the people. Unlike our counterparts, we seek to service all Bahamians. We have Abaco in the north to Inagua in the south. During the last 6 months, the Royal Bahamas Police Force have engaged in the strategic development of officers in an effort to ensure sufficient personnel are available to provide policing services, and in some cases, general assistance to citizens, residents, and tourists. Currently, there are approximately 457 officers, or 18% of the Royal Bahamas Police Force deployed on Grand Bahama, and 215 officers, or 8% of the force deployed on the Family Islands. The associated logistics as a result of the officers being deployed was of high priority. As such, the leasing of rental units was provided to accommodate officers on Abaco, Eleuthera, Andros, and Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, the previous government failed to maintain the respective police stations dispersed throughout our archipelago. The importance of proper police equipment and adequate stations cannot be overstated. When officers know they have an adequate stations furnished with the necessary resources to aid them in providing effective policing services, it gives them confidence. Our government has begun an aggressive approach to tackling the substandard working conditions at the various police stations throughout the country. Mr. Speaker, permit me to outline some of the specific repairs being undertaken. Sudden Police Station in Nassau, Bahamas. The police maintenance team is currently making much needed repairs to that station. Thus far, the entire roof has been repaired and reshingled. The station is being upgraded with new tiles and paint, a modernized kitchen, and upgraded bathrooms. The final projected cost of the upgrades to this station are expected to be some $75,000. The police forensic lab. The maintenance team have been making repairs to this area as well. And over the next few months, a new air conditioning system will be installed to allow the proper graded temperature needed for the specialized equipment to operate effectively. And I may add, Mr. Speaker, the scientists within the lab have been complaining now for many years that the government has invested millions of dollars in equipment. And some of that equipment was destroyed due to the neglect. The officers continue to voice their concerns and cry out with very little support or assistance. And so this has been a problem for many years. And we have to correct it, because we cannot continue to invest and grow a forensic science laboratory with millions of dollars of equipment, and the roof is leaking incessantly. It's counterproductive. And seeing that we are at the stage of this midterm budget debate, we cannot continue to waste the people's monies. And so we're working and moving assiduously to correct this problem. So we continue to effect repairs, Mr. Speaker, throughout the Bahamas, and I can go on. There are work taking place throughout the Bahamas on police stations, and we'll continue to do so. We cannot ask these officers to give of their best 24 hours a day to work in an environment that is unsanitary and leaking daily, and we are not attending to the needs of the people who are having to protect us. And this holds true, Mr. Speaker, as well for Her Majesty's Correction Service, as well as the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And we are moving quickly to improve the conditions for our officers. Mr. Speaker, it is our government's intent to continue this aggressive approach to improve the substandard working conditions that our law enforcement officers face throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. It is imperative and a commitment that this government will take to provide effective working conditions for our officers. Work effectiveness is a key to successful operations within these organizations. Improved working conditions will aid in achieving rapid, effective, and sustainable productivity. Mr. Speaker, it is the intent of this government to introduce a state-of-the-art fleet management system in the Royal Bahamas Police Force in order to efficiently manage and maintain all of its vehicular fleet. Upon coming to office, it was imperative to request an audit of the Royal Bahamas Police Force fleet management system. In November of 2017, a fleet management report was conducted which revealed that the Royal Bahamas Police Force is equipped with a total of 526 vehicles, of which 126 were operable, 139 experienced chronic repairs, 273 vehicles were inoperable and incapable of being repaired. Succinctly,
Those figures, one more time. One more time.
in November of 2017, a fleet management report was conducted, which revealed that the Royal Bahamas Police Force is equipped with a total of 526 vehicles, of which 126 were operable, 139 experienced chronic repairs, so therefore there was in the garage more that was on the streets, and 273 vehicles were inoperable and incapable of being repaired. Succinctly, a mere 23% of its existing fleet is capable of performing police duties at optimal capacity. It is noteworthy to highlight that the majority of the operating fleet is reflected of New Providence, thereby exposing the Family Islands to the vulnerable and substandard police performance. Mr. Speaker, As criminality evolves and becomes more sophisticated, the government of the Bahamas is committed to ensuring and providing cutting-edge technology associated with worldwide industry standards. However, before our government could engage in the aforementioned, it had to first stop the bleeding of wasteful spending due to the mismanagement practices of the fleet system. Large sums of money were being spent with no accountability for proper management of police vehicles. This was coupled with the manual paper recording and filing of mechanical records. This antiquated method, along with wasteful spending, could no longer be the normal practice under this government's watch. Mr. Speaker, the ministry felt it necessary to implement a more modern and effective fleet management system because it is a critical capital asset that has a direct and significant impact on the Royal Bahamas Police Force achieving its core policing functions to ensure that the fleet operation runs efficiently. My ministry has approved, our government has approved $5.9 million to upgrade the fleet management system of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. This significant investment took a strategic and feasible approach to ensure fiscal necessity and accountability. The main driving focus of implementing such a system is to allow the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and by extension, the government of the Bahamas, to reduce, minimize, and remove the risk associated with the overall cost of purchasing vehicles. Once implemented, the fleet management system is expected to improve vehicular use, efficiency, productivity, and overall performance. Mr. Speaker, in a few weeks, a team of officers will travel to the United States to visit police garages to observe industry best practices with a view to adopt a structured computerized fleet management procedure. Upon their return, I eagerly anticipate a report on how best to accomplish the aforesaid expeditiously and effectively to the improvement of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Mr. Speaker, the CCTV project was a crime-fighting initiative undertaken by the government in collaboration with the private sector. Consequently, upon coming to office, we were able to identify numerous challenges with the system, inclusive of improper management of the system, servicing of cameras. Some cameras were inoperable due to bandwidth issues, and the analytical software, which was purchased some time ago, had not been installed, had been actually forgotten about. Of even greater concern was the fact that the government had spent at yet $659,981 to purchase and install the analytics system. But no one sought to follow up as to why it was never installed. The video analytics software was to perform real-time analysis of video stream, identify and generate alerts for a variety of user-defined events relating to people and monitor vehicles and static objects, all of which were pivotal to the success of the program. The Bahamian vendor stated that the U.S. vendor had closed his operation and was unable to provide the necessary support for the software. And so this was over $500,000 that was unaccounted for. And it was not found out until this government came to office. Mr. Speaker, the lack of accountability on the part of those whom were given much responsibility speaks to black hole economics. And under my watch, in my ministry, It is now a thing of the past. Upon assuming office, our government was determined to resolve the issues as having been identified. I am pleased to announce today that steps were taken to correct the problems outlined. A series of meetings with all relevant stakeholders have resulted in the bandwidth problem being rectified and the system being upgraded. The ministry worked with both the local and international vendors to resolve the issues of the software being installed. Mr. Speaker, the government has pledged approximately $488,000 for a CCTV headquarters and maintenance contract for the national program. Expansion of the program will ensure that at-risk communities have the latest crime-fighting technologies. Meanwhile, officers and civilians will be trained so as to ensure qualified persons are monitoring the system. The traditional police-centric approach to crime reduction is not effective, as it must involve other sectors of society. We will commence work immediately on expanding the system throughout the capital and will introduce more features, including license plate readers and gunshot detection analytics. The gunshot detection analytics will allow for the triangulation of where shots are fired so as to improve the police response time and detection. Mr. Speaker, since being introduced in the Bahamas, the electronic monitoring system, commonly referred to as the ankle bracelet program, has posed significant challenges for the police. Upon coming to office, our government sought to review the electronic monitoring system. Initial investigations revealed that there were poor management and lack of efficacy of the program. Prolific offenders, whom the bracelet were mostly designed for, have been able to tamper and disable these bracelets. One offender who fled from a vehicle being chased by the police was able to leave his ankle monitoring bracelet behind. Others who were supposed to be monitored were able to disable their bracelets, place them on their pets, and go out and commit crimes. Further, members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force were frustrated with the program as they were not able to readily locate offenders because the current bracelets were not equipped with an alarm notification system or audio component to communicate the offenders. Consequently, there does not exist a standard operating procedure manual which outlined the roles and responsibilities of the vendor and the police in relation to the offender being monitored. Mr. Speaker, over the past several months, we have engaged the stakeholders of this program through a series of meetings. To date, the government has spent more than $1 million on the program, and my ministry is determined to get value for money. I am happy to report that most of the issues have been rectified by engaging all of the key stakeholders. Hence, the vendor, after consultation with the police, will be unveiling a more up-to-date electronic monitoring system. Let me further add that in short order, the Commissioner will approve and put into action a standard operational procedural manual for the electronic monitoring program. The manual will provide proper procedures for officers to allow, in the event, for example, of a natural disaster, the loss of power, or offenders' breach of the system. Mr. Speaker, all evidence presented would suggest that the new initiatives implemented by our government indicates that police productivity has consistently increased. There is no question that as the police continues to develop strategies based on our government's crime policies, we can expect to see a reduction in crime, especially violent crime. The government, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and key stakeholders will continue to work together seamlessly to design and employ strategic tactics to maintain law and order, safeguard the preservation of the peace, prevent and detect crime, and ensure the enforcement of all laws with which it is charged. The accomplishments discussed were short-term, as there remains significant amount of work ahead as it relates to restructuring and an effort to ensure a safer Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I now move to the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force represents the second arm of law enforcement in the Bahamas. Upon coming into office last May, our government pledged its commitment to provide the necessary human capital, equipment, and operational assets to enable the Royal Bahamas Defense Force to fulfill its mandate in protecting our borders, assisting with law enforcement, and providing disaster relief assistance throughout the Bahamas in conjunction with other local and regional partners. This branch of law enforcement has the difficult task of safeguarding the maritime domain, which is further compounded by an expanding network of criminality and the increasing intensity of hurricanes that threaten the peace and security and prosperity of the Bahamas. However, we are cognizant that the Royal Bahamas Defense Force is the agency of government which stands on the front line of border security. With improved strategies and better use of resources, tremendous inroads are being made. I am pleased to report that the use of a number of new policy frameworks and new operational strategies will not only secure our country, but will allow for its continued growth and development and advancement. Mr. Speaker, our government is preparing the agency to meet the threats and challenges ahead, has established 5 strategic goals that have been classified as 1, decentralization, 2, mobilization, 3, environment and conservation, 4, transformation, 5, regeneration. Mr. Speaker, with reference to decentralization, the Defense Force is seeking to establish adequate bases in the southern islands, especially Inagua and Ragged Islands. Originally intended for the completion by March 2016, these facilities are essential to sustaining extended air and sea patrol operations in the southern Bahamas. Due to the additional demands thrusted upon the Defense Force, it was no longer feasible or economically practical to have patrol boats return to Coral Harbor Base for refueling, only to have to travel back to the southern Bahamas to carry out its duties. Mr. Speaker, upon assuming office, it was revealed that the last government failed to strategically plan for the establishment of adequate bases in the southern Bahamas. In addition, the lack of a comprehensive strategy has resulted in shortage of personnel to meet the agency's multi-purpose role throughout the Bahamas. Nonetheless, our government is committed to ensuring that the agency forges ahead by maximizing the use its resources to ensure that all organizational requirements are met. Accordingly, 120 applicants were accepted for recruit training at HMBS Coral Harbor in January of 2018, this year, to strengthen the force's human capital. Mr. Speaker, as previously alluded to, it is my intent to provide our law enforcement agency with 21st century facilities, so that they can conduct business in the 21st century. Hence, our government hopes to establish on the island of Inagua the HMBS Inagua Strategic Base. The operational base will be responsible for interdicting much of the illicit activities that originate in the southeastern Bahamas. It is also the intent of our government to begin construction of a new administrative building and barracks as well, a technical workshop at the Matthew Town base during the fiscal period. The purpose of this project is to provide logistical and technical support for long-term deployments of coastal and ocean patrol craft assigned to the southeastern Bahamas corridor. Mr. Speaker, funding is available in the budget, and the project is expected to take 9 months to complete at a cost of $2,600,000 once funding is released. The Ministry of National Security is currently awaiting the approval of drawings for this project by the Ministry of Works. Once approved, contractors will be invited to submit bids for approval by Cabinet through the tender board's process. Again, unlike our previous government, this process will be equal, equitable, transparent, because the government of the people should operate in the above manner. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, technological upgrades will also be continued at Matthew Town, Inagua, where the Defense Force Maritime Center is currently undergoing a significant upgrade in preparation to be outfitted with a state-of-the-art radar system at a cost of $2,100,000. Funded by the U.S. government, this system will substantially improve the Defense Force's maritime domain awareness, thus enhancing its ability to detect vessels involved in illicit trade and to better facilitate its search and rescue missions. Mr. Speaker, projects to undergo the same approval process during the next fiscal period include the construction of a base and aircraft hangar at Gunpoint, Ragged Island, situated 120 miles west of Inagua. The proposed base and aircraft hangar at Ragged Island is critically important for sustaining land and sea operations near the eastern border of the Great Bahama Bank, where most of the Dominican poaching occurs. Additionally, the establishment of a base in Ragged Island would also serve as a counter, what is described as a balloon effect. As air and sea patrols increased in the southeastern Bahamas, drug and migrant smuggling routes are expected to shift away from the Inagua area towards other areas such as Ragged Island Chain and the Great Bahama Bank. The proposed bases in the southeastern Bahamas will facilitate the decentralization of the Defense Force's operations at strategic locations that would enable the Defense Force to detect, track, and apprehend criminals. In the future, Mr. Speaker, it is the intent of our government to construct new bases in Grand Bahama, Bimini, and Abaco. Mr. Speaker, while the Defense Force is decentralizing some of its operations, it is important to maintain the Coral Harbor base. Currently, the Coral Harbor base has adequate storage and maintenance space for its spares, equipment, supplies, and maintenance of patrol craft due to increased number of personnel and staff. Mr. Speaker, I therefore intend to approve the commencement, with the approval of Cabinet, the construction of a new engineering workshop and supply warehouse on the north shore of Coral Harbor base during the next fiscal period. These facilities will serve as primary location for a much-needed storage and maintenance spaces. Additionally, additional upgrades at the Coral Harbor base this fiscal period will include the construction of a parking lot on the northern side of the base to accommodate the workforce. Likewise, there are plans to procure a 1,000 kilowatt generator to power the northern side of the base, allowing for continuity of the day-to-day running of operations in the event of primary power source fails. Mr. Speaker, with reference to mobilization, it is the intent of our government to ensure that the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, is ready to respond to the threats both locally, regionally, and internationally. In accordance, the Defense Force has assisted in evacuating hundreds of residents from Inagua and Ragged Island in advance of Hurricane Irma, as well as managing hurricane shelters in New Providence. To date, the Defense Force personnel are still in Ragged Island, providing security to local residents and are helping to restore normalcy to that island. More recently, the Defense Force personnel have also assisted local authorities with shelter management for persons left homeless in the aftermath of a major fire in the mud, North Abaco. Mr. Speaker, this is what the government of the people, and the people, this is what the government of the people means and is all about. Mr. Speaker, last year, and for the first time in its history, the Defense Force participated in a major regional disaster relief operation. This included deploying its landing craft, HMBS Lawrence Major, on a dual overseas mission to the Commonwealth of Dominica to transport personnel and relief supplies from the Bahamas and Jamaica on behalf of both governments, as well as the Bahamian Dominican community. The significance and success of this effort has elevated the Bahamas Defense Force status in the region. And we are grateful to our Prime Minister for such vision and such a big heart for extending the reach of the Bahamas to our neighbors in need. Rest assured that our government will continue to propel this and all other agencies and law enforcement so that we will continue to be relevant leaders within the regional and global context. Mr. Speaker, with reference to the environment and conservation, our government is committed to the preservation of our environment. Thus, under our government, the Defense Force has commenced the installation of its first coastal radar as a part of a long-term national coastal radar program. It has also initiated the development of boat plans for the National Coastal Security and the drones program. To this end, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force has implemented the assessment phase of the Coastal Security Program for New Providence and has also commenced reconnaissance flights operations out of Matthewtown, Inagua, in support of its efforts. Mr. Speaker, my ministry is ever cognizant of the country's long-standing reliance on the sea for social and economic sustainability. In accordance, it is and will continue to be our government's intent to ensure that the Defense Force plays a pivotal role in assisting and protecting our marine resources. As previously alluded to, law enforcement agencies will not operate in silos, but work hand in hand without duplicity of monies and efforts to safeguard our nation. In conjunction with other law enforcement agencies, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force is part of a multi-agency coastal security program along with the police force, the Customs Department, the Immigration Department, and the Immigration Department. The collaborative effort is aimed at securing the coast of New Providence, as well as the Family Islands as necessary, against migrants, drugs, guns, and other contraband smuggling activities. Testing and evaluation of this initiative has been initiated and is expected to be fully implemented after the Cabinet has an opportunity to see and approve it. Full implementation of the plans hope to be in place by sometime mid-2018, certainly in New Providence. And it will consist of a collaborative on and offshore coastal patrol, observation post, complemented by drone operations. Mr. Speaker, all within this honorable House are aware that I am a proponent of 21st century professional development. If our agencies are to operate using global principles and standards, then it is imperative that our officers have 21st century training. With reference to transformation, it is our intent to encourage and provide professional development opportunities for the RBDF personnel to transform their operational practices. As such, during the first half of 2017 and 18 fiscal period, I have ensured that the Defense Force officers and Marines had the opportunities to participate in a host of local and overseas training throughout the United States in conjunction with the U.S. State Department under its International Military Education Training Program and the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. Mr. Speaker, in addition, officers, thank you, sir, Darren. In addition, officers have also had the opportunity to engage in professional development training at Britannia Royal Naval College and other parts of Europe and the Caribbean. The RBDF is embarking on the creation of an accredited Maritime Defense Training Institute for the training of its officers and enlisted personnel. This military institution will focus on the development of character and leadership management and supervisory and professional and technical skills for members of the force. It is our vision for the Defense Force to have this institution so as to enroll personnel from partner nation forces within the region. Additionally, the force has already commenced the first phase of development of its Naval Infantry School with the intentions of making it a regional center for excellence for amphibious military training. Mr. Speaker, plans are underway this fiscal period to install a newly phased maritime bridge simulator at the HMBS Coral Harbor. The simulator was a part of the Sandy Bottom project, and its current cost is expected to be $1,600,000. This asset will provide the assistance needed to effectively train and prepare those officers and Marines who are in command of the respective Defense Force vessels. This simulator will not only reduce the required time to qualify officers, but it will also allow those officers to experience various simulated conditions at sea, thereby helping to better prepare them for the future. Mr. Speaker, I stated in my budget communication in 2017 that the government would undertake a comprehensive manpower audit of all of its law enforcement agencies. The manpower audit for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force is closely linked to the operation transformation because it focuses on the professional development of its personnel from recruitment to retirement. With reference to the human capital, this agency, we needed to determine as a matter of urgency what is required in the form of human resources to effectively operate the RBDF as the base has expanded, and it will continue to do so in the future. I am pleased to report that the audit is in progress, and a final report is expected in due course. Mr. Speaker, using research methodology and analysis, the audit will provide insight into the contextual and structural layers of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. More importantly, it will determine the number of personnel necessary to complement the strength of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Simultaneously, a review of the organizational structure will assist in making it relevant to the 21st century principles and practices necessary to operate within the Bahamas. Also, changes are necessary to ensure that the human capital development programs are adequate to assist current members of the Defense Force and prepare new recruits while offering feasible and transparent practices from recruitment to retirement. Mr. Speaker, our government's ultimate goal is to rebrand the Royal Bahamas Defense Force with a strategic focus on developing a purposeful agency that is able to competently safeguard the maritime domains of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, provide readily available disaster relief, and provide search and rescue operations in a robust society driven by technological advancements. More importantly, the agency will develop a comprehensive approach to its main portfolios driven by evidence-based data. Mr. Speaker, with reference to its reintegration, which focuses on the development of our nation's youth, the Royal Bahamas Police Force is fully committed. Succession planning is a pivotal concern to our government. Being ever mindful that law enforcement agencies must have viable succession planning to ensure that pipeline remains filled with talented and qualified individuals equipped with the necessary knowledge and skills is absolutely essential. I am pleased to report to this honorable House that remarkable inroads are being made in transforming the lives of hundreds of Bahamian high school youth through the Force's Ranger program. So successful has the program become that we have commenced the transformation of the program into a National Rangers Youth Service program. The program has been phenomenal in assisting in the development of our nation's youth, as it is geared towards developing character, leadership, while fostering entry-level skills for the workplace, as well as instilling a sense of social responsibility in our nation's youth. That's a water break. Mr. Speaker, the program presently operates on New Providence, Grand Bahama, Abaco, the Berry Islands, North Andros, North Eleuthera, and Long Island, and involves over 30 high schools with approximately 1,500 students. In the very near future, the program will be partnering with BAIC, BAMZ, and BTVI, so as to provide viable options for the students upon exiting the compulsory phase of the education sector. Due to the effectiveness of the program, it was awarded the National Youth Organization Awards for the 2017 from the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture. Plans are now being formulated for the development of a National Rangers Leadership Institute. Mr. Speaker, under this government, the future of our young people is hopeful. Our young people have a lot to celebrate about. Mr. Speaker, now on the topic of capital development projects. This breaks my heart due to the complacency and lack of poor governance by the previous administration. The Sandy Bottom project was a program designed to facilitate the decentralization of the Defense Forces operation through the acquisition of new patrol craft, the modernizing of ports, and the dredging of harbors. Coral Harbor, New Providence, Gunpoint, Ragged Island, and Matthewtown, Inagua. The project was established in an agreement between the Ministry of National Security, the client, and Damon Shipyard, the contractor. The civil works phase of the project was coordinated by the project execution unit that was headed by a representative from the Ministry of Works, along with an engineer, consultant, and a liaison officer from the Defense Force. Mr. Speaker, this project represents another failed attempt by the previous government to strategically plan. And I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by that. As the old saying goes, when you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. The expected cost of the project was approximately $232 million. And it is represented that it represented the single largest capital investment the government of the Bahamas has ever made in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Consequently, a project which should have already been completed is still ongoing because our government had to revisit all of the contractual agreements and plan so as to set it on a course for success. Approximately 9 patrol crafts were purchased from Damon Shipbuilders, whom were responsible for the completion of the refit and or outstanding warranty-related repairs to 2 Bahamas-class vessels, the dredging of harbors and channels at the Coral Harbor based in New Providence, Matthewtown in Inagua, the Gunpoint in Ragged Island, and the construction of quay walls and revetments at the aforementioned 3 harbors. To date, a total of $219,182,712.48 has been spent. The project, with a balance of $5,460,836 remaining. The outstanding sum will pay for the completion of the HMBS Bahamas and Nassau refit, shipping and installation of the bridge simulator, and a retention of contingency fees on completion of the Sandy Bottom project. Mr. Speaker, being cognizant of good business acumen, the decision to remove the building contracts from Van Ord's scope was made by the previous government after reviewing the was made by the Ministry of National Security after removing the cost impact to the government. Van Ord from the Netherlands was the primary subcontractor hired by Damon Shipyard. Van Ord hired Heavy Marine Foundation from the Bahamas to undertake the installation of the quay walls and the aprons at Coral Harbor, and they began the tendering process for the nominated subcontractors for the 7 buildings needed by the RBDF. The former government failed to monitor the Sandy Bottom project effectively. As such, the original completion date of March 2016 had to be extended, and the remaining cost was unjustifiable. Hence, the cost of the remaining 6 buildings will now be paid out of the Defense Force's capital development budget over the next 2 budget cycles. Mr. Speaker, other problems surrounding the project included the scope of works at Coral Harbor had changed. The government agreed upon an option for the reclamation areas in the vicinity of the old hotel at the base that increased the Royal Bahamas Defense Force property footprint by 2.5 acres. This change in scope required the import of additional rocks from the Netherlands, which required additional time and money. Simultaneously, the then government had to decide a way forward for the transplanting of a number of mature clusters of brain corals in the channels, which also impacted the completion deadline. Second, Mr. Speaker, the scope of works also changed on the island of Inagua. Following a town meeting with the community leaders, the then government decided to extend the footprint of the harbor at Inagua. This change in scope required the ordering of additional construction materials from the Netherlands, which resulted in an extension of time for the contractor. Further, with the advent of Hurricane Joaquin, extensive damages had been sustained in the southern quay wall at Inagua, which resulted in a total reconstruction of the quay wall at this location, as opposed to the refurbishment of the same structure as mandated in the contract document, which also resulted in delays for the Sandy Bottom project. Third, Mr. Speaker, on Ragged Island, the then government sought to increase the project scope. Under the original scope, the contractor was mandated to dredge the channel entrance and install the channel markers. However, due to the incomplete state of the existing Gunpoint Harbor, the then government extended the scope, which included the construction of the breakwater system. This involved the importation of more rocks from Norway by a bulk carrier, the completion of the northern quay wall with the furnishing installed, and the construction of the southern quay wall with roll-on, roll-off, and slipway system, and the installation of all furnishing and drainage systems. Mr. Speaker, such lack of proper planning will not occur under our government, for we are stewards of effective and efficient governance. Since coming to office, we have sought to ensure that the finger jetty for the 150-ton travel lift was completed at the Coral Harbor base. Also, the remaining works at Ragged Island and Matthewtown, Inagua, have been completed. It is anticipated that the pedestals for the ship-to-shore power would be energized and the operation building would be completed in short order. Mr. Speaker, consequently, good governance is easier said than done. It would seem to a logical person that if one is going to purchase a new craft, then the electrification of pedestal necessary for supplying of electrical power to the ships when moored alongside the Coral Harbor base would be a priority. Not the case under the previous administration, as they failed to see the long-term necessary logistics. Absolutely no consideration was given for the electrification of pedestals and the human capital necessary to maintain the new developments. Any new development has brought a financial and human capital cost and an inefficiency in capacity and capability has exponentially cost if it's an afterthought. Mr. Speaker, this component was not a part of the Sandy Bottom scope, and therefore it became the government's responsibility. However, the contractor installed all of the infrastructure mandated under their contract involving the electrical system at the Coral Harbor base. The decision to procure a contractor for the electrification of the pedestal is the nominated approach, as cited in the Van Ord contract. This approach allowed the client to exercise the right to forward names to potential bidders to the project execution unit to start the tendering process. More importantly, an invitation was submitted to the existing electrical contractors, along with additional contractors with a revised scope for their consideration. The contractors under consideration are all on the list of Ministry of Works approved contractors. Again, Mr. Speaker, it is our government's intent to ensure we have qualified contracts with insurance so as to avoid a fiasco, as was the case with the BAMSI which occurred under the former government. Mr. Speaker, to ensure equal and equitable process, it was further mandated that such proposals be submitted to the Commodore of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Office, marked confidential, for onward transmission to the Tenders Board for approval by the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of National Security, and the Cabinet. Proposals for the electrification of the pedestals were expected to be submitted no later than the 2nd of March 2018. The completion of the electrification project will also entail a discussions with the Bahamas Power and Light on electrical power requirements in order to obtain costs, the procurement of an electrical contractor through the tender process, and the procurement of a contractor to construct plate houses on both south and north sides of the base through the tender process. The electrification project is expected to take approximately 4 to 6 months to complete upon approval of funding. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, until the completion of all necessary work, patrol crafts are required to constantly run their generators when moored alongside the Coral Harbor base. Patrol craft generators consume approximately 75 gallons of diesel per day at a cost of $300 per day, or approximately $9,000 per month.
No shore power.
Without electrical shore power, ship generators are required to operate 24 hours a day for the operation of the equipment on board the ship. Fuel consumption, just an example, fuel consumption. It is fuel consumption between 2000, because we started from 2016, fuel consumption between June of 2016 to June of 2017 ran to a total of about $400,000. So this is when you fail to plan.
What about wear and tear on those engines?
Well, coming to that right now. This accelerates wear and tear on the generators and increases maintenance requirements and downtime for servicing and repairs.
Shameful, shameful, shameful.
To date, 4 generators have had to be purchased at a cost of $150,000 as replacement on board the 42-meter patrol craft due to constant running. The problem will also persist for ships deployed. Listen to this one. The problem will also persist to ships deployed to the southeastern Bahamas. Consequently, power supply would not be available in Inagua and Ragged Island until after the proposed plans for the expansion and construction of the bases have been approved. As a result, ships deployed are required to operate their generators 24 hours a day.
7 days a week,
The electrification of pedestals along quay walls and jetties would therefore allow generators to be shut down, thereby extending their service life and minimizing downtime for patrol craft. Mr. Speaker, it is my intent to examine the most cost-effective and expeditious measures to ensure that we maintain this $232 million investment of the people's money. Also, it is imperative that we devise effective means to build capacity within the Royal Bahamas Defense Force to maintain these vessels. Currently, Damon is seeking a 3 to 5 year contract to maintain our vessels while we build capacity to do the same, because we have no one to maintain these vessels we purchased. It was never part of the agreement, apparently. As such, it once again lends credence on the need for a manpower audit, which will ensure that we have adequate trained engineers to be able to deal with these issues, but more importantly, to meet the needs of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Mr. Speaker, with reference to patrol crafts, of the 9 patrol crafts purchased from Diamond Shipbuilders, 2 are currently non-operational. Diamond engineers and technicians will complete repairs to the hull of the HMBS Madeira by early March. Madeira hull was damaged by a Dominican poaching vessel after a failed attempt to escape. 2 Dominican vessels were captured during that incident in November 2016. Repairs will be carried out by Diamond technicians alongside the Coral Harbor base to ensure the ship's warranty is maintained. All occupants have since served their court sentences at the Department of Correctional Services. The second vessel, the HMBS Arthur Hanna, is expected to commence repairs later this year upon acquisition of parts as a result of the grounding in November of last year. Mr. Speaker, with regards to the Bahamas-class vessel, the HMBS Nassau, completed its refit in April of last year, but has experienced an engine failure problem on 2 separate occasions involving the ingress of water. The second occasion occurred after a new engine was shipped under warranty and installed. However, investigations conducted by Caterpillar representatives suggest a design flaw within the exhaust system that was installed by the original shipbuilders in the United States. The matter is being reviewed by the Office of the Attorney General for a final determination with respect to culpability for the damage and the redesign of the exhaust system. The HMBS Bahamas has sustained extensive damage after a fire had broken out on board the vessel during the initial refit at Bradford Marine and Grand Bahama in October 2016. The vessel was subsequently shipped to Diamond in the Netherlands for completion of refit, which was returned in May of 2017. Mr. Speaker, with reference to the construction of the Operations Command Center, it is expected to be completed in March and fully operational during the last quarter of 2017-2018 fiscal period. The Operations Center will enhance the RBDF's capacity to command and control all of its air, land, and sea operations. Designed under the Sandy Bottom Project, the 3-story building will become the conduit for command, control, communications, intelligence, surveillance, and interdiction operations throughout the Bahamas. It will also be outfitted with the latest state-of-the-art technologies for ship and aircraft detection, tracking, and interception operations. Feeds from the coastal radar system, the force's over-the-horizon tactical tracking system, the maritime automated identification system, the motor turbo radio trunking system, and the drone and coastal security programs will also be channeled through the state-of-the-art command center to create a common operating picture that will inform command decisions and better synchronize operations. Mr. Speaker, the Tight Security Command Center will be staffed by representatives from the Defense Force, Seagoing Squadron, Air Wing Commando Squadron, and Harbor-Based Patrol Unit, as well as representatives from the other enforcement agencies will also be added to that center to go hand in hand with our government's multi-agency approach. Mr. Speaker, with reference to the detection and tracking devices, a new coastal radar system was purchased. It will consist of a series of radars installed at strategic locations throughout our chain of islands to enhance the detection, traction, and interdiction capabilities of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force over the next 5 years. Funded by the U.S. government or State Department, the first coastal radar is in the process of being installed in Inagua and will be completed during the first quarter of this year. The radar comes equipped with forward-looking infrared cameras as well as a global maritime distress and safety system for search and rescue operation, and an automatic identification system for identifying and tracking commercial vessels plying in the area. Additionally, provisions will be made over the next 12 months to install the over-the-horizon tactical tracking system on board the Defense Forces ships and aircraft for tracking and suspect vessels. Also, the base patrol craft and aircraft will be outfitted with a Motorola motor-turbo radio trunking system for enhanced communications between air, land, and sea assets of the Defense Force and its partner agencies. Both tracking and communication systems will serve us well. Mr. Speaker, in an effort to ensure that all law enforcement agencies in the Bahamas operate on one continuum, our government has tasked the Royal Bahamas Defense Force in conjunction with the other law enforcement agencies to develop and implement and coordinate an unmanned aerial system program to aid with the detection, tracking, and interdiction of wanted suspects, armed robbers, housebreakers, car thieves, illicit smugglers, and poachers on land and at sea. A request for proposal is being prepared to determine the best course of action for this program, which is intended to be implemented during the next fiscal period. Mr. Speaker, it is the intent of our government to make the Defense Force one of the most efficient and effective military agencies in this region. Preparations are being made by the Defense Force and the U.S. Southern Command to host the annual Regional Military Trade Wind Exercise here in the Bahamas in June of this year. Sponsored by the United States government and the U.S. Military Southern Command, the 2-week-long military exercise will conduct a major counterterrorism training event involving over 400 persons from 20 nations with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force as the lead agency commanding various units of militaries from around the Caribbean and the world. The forces involved, platoon, and personnel are expected to extract vulnerable, real-time experiences from such an event. Mr. Speaker, this will ultimately aid in the agencies being fully prepared to address any national security threat. Mr. Speaker, in retrospect, and despite challenges past and present, the Defense Force continues to make positive strides towards the development and implementation of a strategic plan that will promote the security, peace, and prosperity of the Bahamas over the next few years. It is an agenda that aims to decentralize its operation, invest in the development of human capital, mobilize its operations locally and overseas, regenerate the potential of Bahamian youth through its Rangers program services, and work towards conserving the natural environment of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, our government and the people of the Bahamas are proud of both the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the Police Force for their outstanding accomplishments during the past year and the future goals they endeavor to achieve. We are very appreciative of the multiple roles that these officers and Marines are called on to perform, and their ability to adapt and to adjust to the ever-changing world of criminality that presents numerous challenges through the length and breadth of this archipelago with vast maritime borders. To this end, the members of the Defense Force can rest assured of the commitment of our government to their success, development, and well-being. We therefore encourage the men and women of the Defense Force to continue to perform at their very best, as together we guard our heritage. The Department of Correctional Services. Mr. Speaker, Department of Correctional Services is the third arm of the law enforcement under the Ministry of National Security. It is charged with maintaining inmates in a controlled, safe, and secure and humane environment that encourages rehabilitation and successful reintegration into society. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services has been faced with several challenges over the fiscal year, including sources to fund and repair damages caused by Hurricane Matthew. Mr. Speaker, much of the BDCS issues stem from the previous government's ineffectiveness to provide the agency with the necessary assistance to bring about reform. The former government spoke about transitioning the agency from a penal system to a correctional facility. But I am sad to report that there have been very little, if any, substantial steps taken to accomplish the same. Upon entering office, I visited the correctional institution, and the conditions are inhumane and demoralizing for both officers and inmates. Mr. Speaker, rest assured that our government is committed to transforming this institution from a penal to a corrective facility. Our focus will be on identifying highly qualified and skilled individuals whom are capable of leading such an institution. Ultimately, our goal is to devise a correctional facility that will provide adequate facilities, that will promote safe communities through the humane custodial treatment and supervision of our officers, first and foremost, at the Correction Department and the inmates. The officers and major stakeholders will work collaboratively with the interagencies to complete a comprehensive assessment and evaluation of all cell blocks, devise and manage appropriate rehabilitative programs for each inmate, and facilitate adequate custody levels and institution placement of all inmates. In addition, inmates transitioning through the system will have orientation classes and will begin learning how to navigate the corrective facility. Mr. Speaker, the government and our government recently established a parole system in an effort to improve on the quality of good government and aligned with agency's new correctional mandate. Since its establishment, members of the committee have traveled extensively to obtain first-hand experiences with respect to the value of parole systems in other countries such as Canada, the United States, and Jamaica and Trinidad. Upon their return, it was decided that the current system existing in places like Jamaica would be best suited for the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, the benefits of a parole system in the Bahamas would mean a more pragmatic and judiciary use of resources, the courts, the prosecutors, the police, and the correctional officers. 2, better use of scarce resources both on the part of the state and the accused. 3, a smoother reintegration of accused and convicted offenders into society. And 4, a greater feeling of safety on the part of the general public when an individual is released on parole. Mr. Speaker, under my remit, the committee at the B-Docks will work hand in hand to provide the most appropriate environment for the rehabilitation of inmates. The focus will be on rehabilitation, reformation, and reintegration of inmates into society. With my ministry's assistance, we will be able to develop meaningful prison reform in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, in conjunction with the aforementioned, the facility will soon offer inmates in and out of the system the opportunity to be guided by qualified probation officers. Serving officers now have the opportunity to increase their knowledge and skills in effective probation and parole procedures, theories, techniques, administration, and relevant services for this populace. The ultimate goal will be to help facilitate inmates on the road to a successful rehabilitation and reintegration into society with the intent to reduce recidivism. Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday past, Cabinet approved the recruitment of 60 trainee correctional officers at an estimated cost of $300,000. This group of recruits will be subjected to a stringent vetting and pre-employment assessment to determine their suitability for this challenging profession. Mr. Speaker, under this government, the Correctional Services Department was mandated to upgrade and modernize its training regime to ensure new officers are equipped with current best practices knowledge and skills in correctional services delivery. A concerted effort has been undertaken to ensure that training, knowledge, and skills are transferable so as to better meet the needs of the agencies. More importantly, the officers' training and practical use will assist in transforming the facility from punitive to correctional. Mr. Speaker, Hurricane Matthew severely damaged a number of buildings at the Department of Corrections, including the maximum security unit, the main kitchen and stores area, the administration block, the security processing center, the minimum security unit. Consequently, it has been almost 2 years since the department sustained damages associated with the 2006 storm. Yet repairs have been minimal or non-existent. Since assuming office, our government has sought to take steps to remedy the pending issue. In August of 2017, the Ministry of Works brought in contracting companies to view the scope of work. The submitted tenders are in the process of being evaluated, and a vendor will be selected in due course. The agency's use of in-house labor has been able to make some strides to repair in some of the damages sustained during the hurricane. In the interest of time. He want to hear more. All right, sorry. So self-sufficient. So road paving. Mr. Speaker, the former government did the Department of Corrections an injustice. However, my government is poised to correct the wrongs that were done. With reference to its infrastructure, the roads at the departments are in dilapidated states and require major repairs. The scope of works for this project was put out to tender, and the winning bid for $70,000. Funding for this project exists within the current estimates, and we hope to have the roads repaired in short order. I want to move, Mr. Speaker, in the interest of time, to our citizen security and justice program. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Finance of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas entered a loan agreement effective the 4th of February 2016, to receive financing from the Inter-American Development Bank to implement a citizen security and justice program. The overall objective of this program are to improve the behaviors for nonviolent conflict resolution in New Providence, and we're working now on extending that to the Family Islands, to increase the employability and the employment of the at-risk youth population, to strengthen the institutional capabilities of the justice services, and to reduce recidivism among persons within the justice system. The key ministerial and department stakeholders involved in the program include the Ministry of National Security, the Ministry of Social Services, the Ministry of Labor, the Office of the Attorney General, the Department of Corrections, the Department of Rehabilitative and Welfare Services, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Youth, the Ministry of Finance. As of the 31st of December 2017, the total drawdown on the $20 million IDB loan facility was some $2,373,556. No funds have been drawn down since March of 2017. Between the inception of the program and the 31st of December 2017, approximately $1,512,918, or 8% of the overall loan, had been spent. Mr. Speaker, the Citizen Security and Justice Program, and we have been hearing so much about that in recent times, was stagnant when we took office in 2017, as key deliverables were not being achieved in accordance with the project's planned timelines. One observation was the appointment of the steering committee had no regular meetings to facilitate implementation of the program. In fact, there was only one documented meeting, which was held in March of 2017. For a project of this magnitude, the steering committee should have met at least once a quarter, since they are responsible for ratifying the decisions that guide and drive the project deliverables. Mr. Speaker, we further observe that there was limited evidence that sufficient senior officials in the government were involved in the key decision-making process. Consequently, the following steps were taken to put the project back on track to ensure that the Bahamian people get the most value for their money spent. First, the project team met with ministers of government, including the cabinet, to share and explain what the program is all about and how various ministries will be impacted, and the roles of various ministries. Second, the team met with the acting Chief Justice and the Registrar of the Courts to assess their needs and align them with the deliverables offered under the project. The project team also liaised with Over the Hill Rejuvenation Project to share information and resources paid for under this project, so as to avoid duplication of efforts and resources. Third, a new steering committee comprising of the permanent secretaries from 9 ministries has been appointed to ensure that the stakeholders buy in and involvement for this program. Mr. Speaker, further, under Citizen Security and the Justice Program, the government has invested some $740,625.52 in 2 community centers. One, the Foxdale Community Center, was a cost of $367,862.01. That's in addition to the $11+ million that was mentioned by the Deputy Prime Minister a few days ago. And the second, in the Kwaku Street Center, which was $372,763.51. It should be noted that these programs were expended even though a formal lease agreement was not executed between the government and the private owners of these refurbished buildings. We still have yet to sign a lease agreement. But monies, the people's monies, were invested long before that.
Who wants to do?
Which one?
Across the street. Who on that?
Let me tell you. We believe that this approach was counterproductive, and moving forward, we will seek to invest solely in properties owned by the government and the people of the Bahamas. One such property is the existing community center on Blue Hill Road. Mr. Speaker, as a result of Mr. Speaker, as a result of not following the proper public service hiring protocols, these individuals that were hired for this center and for the Citizens Justice Program were not paid and could not be paid for months. The previous administration committed $624,332.76 outside of the loan resources to hire 45 persons, even though there were no clear plan for what they would be doing. Consequently, we were faced with no other option about to release 7 of the 60. All right? 9 remain to ensure that these centers are at least maintained until we are able to determine who owns them and the protocol moving forward. To date, our government has taken more remedial action to correct some of the missteps taken as it relates to this program. Mr. Speaker, now turn to Neighborhood Watch. Mr. Speaker, my government introduced the National Neighborhood Watch program in November of 2017. This program is intended to form the basis of bringing the police and the community in partnership to address crime-related issues affecting communities. It is the intentions of our administration to launch this program in the coming days. Mr. Speaker, once initiated, the program will formulate guidelines that will govern the management and operation of this partnership between the police and the community, explore the introduction of CCTV and citizen patrols, along with other crime prevention measures as a part of its community focus. It will also seek to partner with existing community youth groups and encourage the establishment of other initiatives and activities geared towards at-risk youth. Mr. Speaker, key to the administration of this program is the National Neighborhood Watch Council. In January of this year, the council was established and 2 chairs were elected to provide oversight and coordination of the core goals of the program. The National Neighborhood Watch Council, which is one of those policy initiatives under our government's umbrella, will build and sustain a nationwide culture of prevention that is focused on safety, awareness, and observation, increase the number of individuals who are likely to be exposed to crime prevention messages, increase awareness on how individuals can provide or prevent themselves from becoming victims of crime, help communities understand and address the root causes of crime, increase the number of crime prevention practitioners who are certified crime prevention specialists, engage the power of new technologies, and develop program training, publications, and other tools that are based on scientific research, data evaluation, effectiveness evaluation, needs assessment in the field, and emergent or re-emergent trends in crime and crime prevention. To implement a quality improvement process with crime prevention practitioners that focuses on teaching and learning from the field about new crime trends and effective prevention strategies. Leverage resources to provide tools for local groups at the forefront of crime prevention, and focus on youth engagement and empowerment activities. Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday past, Cabinet approved the launch of this new initiative, the National Neighborhood Watch Council, which is one of our government's key initiatives on crime. And as I close, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is a small nation with highly qualified and hard-working individuals, most of whom only want to make an honest living. As an officer, and now as a member of this honorable House, I pledge to the Bahamian people that I will use all of the resources under my remit to ensure that they have a safe and secure Bahamas. Further, with the assistance of the hard-working officers and Marines, civil servants, and civilians, we are assiduously collaborating with all stakeholders to reduce the unacceptable level of crime in our nation. We will continue to remain goal-oriented and strategic as we search to find answers to our country's most challenging issues. Meanwhile, we will continue to strengthen our borders, offer effective programs to combat drugs and eradicate the exploitation of humans. Mr. Speaker, the steps taken thus far are only a small fraction of the work and the progress that we have made since coming to office. We will continue to focus on the business of governing and transforming the Bahamas into a country of 21st century operational practices and standards with accountability and transparency that are undergirded with evidence-based decision-making practices. I would like to thank the great constituents of Mount Moriah, citizens and residents of this great country for their support. I also would like to thank the hard-working police officers, defense force officers, correctional officers, persons at the parliamentary registrar, and officers at the Ministry of National Security for the work that they continue to do to make our nation safer. Your work, your service, and dedication are neither unnoticed nor appreciated. A thankful government appreciates you. Thank you. Speaker, one final act. I wish to lay on the floor of this honorable House, on the floor of this honorable House, a copy of the Commissioner's policing plan.
Yeah.
On the table.
Order that the document be brought up.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I still have some more. Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
Let's talk. I ain't saying nothing about your uncle. Future. Huh? Bright future. Our country. Secure, young people. More.
Are we breaking now?
Yeah. That's why I did it. We should take the lunch break.
Order that the plan do lie on the table. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Central Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I think this would be an appropriate time to take the luncheon adjournment, so I move that the House do now suspend until 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Second. It has been moved. It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House do suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of the House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.